The Whispering House. The old house at the edge of the town had always been a subject of whispers. Few dared to go near it, and fewer still had ever lived to tell the tale. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had died there in gruesome, mysterious ways. But when a young journalist, Claire, arrived in town to write an article about the eerie old mansion, the locals warned her to leave well enough alone. Ignoring their warnings, Claire rented a room at the inn and set out to investigate. She was determined to uncover the truth behind the house's dark reputation, convinced that it was just a collection of urban legends. The mansion loomed on the hill like a decaying sentinel, its windows like hollow eyes staring down at the village below. Claire stood before the rusted gates and took a deep breath, her camera slung over her shoulder. The air around the house felt wrong, heavy, oppressive, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The door creaked open, as if inviting her in. She hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The first thing Claire noticed was the smell: dust, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like blood. The air was thick, stagnant. The floorboards groaned underfoot as she made her way down a narrow corridor, her flashlight beam flickering in the darkness. Each room she entered seemed to have been frozen in time. There were faded photographs on the walls, families posing together, their eyes oddly hollow, and old furniture draped in sheets. In one room, a cracked mirror reflected her image, but her face looked different, older somehow. She quickly turned away. Then she found the stairs. They spiraled down into a cold, shadowed basement. Her heart pounded in her chest as she descended, the air growing colder with every step. When she reached the bottom, she was met with a chilling sight. A small, dimly lit room sat at the end of the basement. There, in the center, was an old wooden chair, its legs stained dark with something that might have once been blood. Chains hung from the ceiling, and beside them was a series of marks on the stone floor, as though something or someone had been dragged across it. Suddenly, Claire's flashlight flickered and went out. The basement was plunged into darkness. A whisper broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come here." Claire froze. The voice was soft, like a breath against her ear. But it was unmistakably there. She whipped around, her heart racing, but there was no one to be seen. The temperature dropped further, and the air thickened with an unsettling presence. Claire reached for her phone, but it was dead. "Go back! Go back now!" The voice came again, this time more urgent, laced with something like fear. Her blood ran cold. She turned, almost instinctively, and ran up the stairs. As she reached the top, she stumbled into a long hallway where doors lined both sides. One door was slightly ajar, and Claire's curiosity pushed her forward. Inside, she found a room covered in dust and cobwebs, the furniture abandoned but not forgotten. There was a dresser against the wall, and in its cracked mirror, Claire saw something that made her blood freeze in her veins, a figure standing behind her, barely visible in the dim light. She spun around, but no one was there. Her breathing quickened, and her pulse hammered in her throat. Then the sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The silence that followed was suffocating. From the shadows, something began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, as if drawn to her. Claire's mind raced. She had to get out. She sprinted for the door, but as she grabbed the handle, it jerked back from her grasp as if pulled by an invisible force. She turned, heart pounding, to see the figure from the mirror now standing in front of her. A pale, gaunt face, eyes wide with terror, its mouth moving soundlessly. "Help me," it whispered, and its mouth twisted into a grin, too wide, too unnatural. Claire stumbled back, her legs weakening beneath her. Her back hit the wall as the figure took a step closer. It was no longer human. Its body stretched and distorted in ways that were impossible to comprehend, and it was all she could do to stop herself from screaming. Then, in the corner of the room, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A pile of tattered clothes, a rusted knife lying beside them. The figure lunged and Claire barely managed to dodge, falling to the ground. She scrambled toward the door again, but her hand was caught by cold, skeletal fingers. She yanked herself free, managing to wrench the door open. The hallway stretched endlessly before her. The house was alive, alive in a way she could not understand. It was feeding on her fear. She ran, her footsteps echoing in the silence, but no matter how fast she moved, the whispers were always just behind her. "Come closer," they urged, soft and pleading. "We need you." Claire reached the front door, only to find it locked. Panic surged. She turned, breath ragged, to see the entire house around her darkening, closing in. The air was thick with shadows. Her only option was the cellar door at the back. She threw herself at it, wrenching it open. Down the stairs, deeper into the dark heart of the house. The whispers followed her, but this time, they were louder. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices. Voices of the dead. Voices of those who had been trapped here long ago. She could hear them, all of them, crying out for release. And then, in the deepest part of the cellar, she saw it. A ritual circle, drawn in blood, with names scrawled in frantic script all around it. In the center, an ancient, rotting body, its eyes wide open, staring straight at her. "You're the last," the voice whispered again, and Claire felt the cold fingers of death close around her throat. And then there was nothing. The next morning, the locals found her camera outside the house, its lens shattered. There was no sign of Claire. The whispering house stood as it always had, silent, waiting for the next soul to dare to uncover its secrets.